Welcome students to your next video lesson. Today we'll be looking at graphing and writing inequalities. Alright, so hope you enjoy. Just buckle on in. Before we get started, I do want you to know that you can always look on page 205 and the following pages after that page to get more help on this topic. Moving on. Graphing and writing inequalities. Well, first it would help us to know, we know what graphing is. I would hope at this point you know what graphing is. I think you know what writing is. But you don't know what that means in reference to inequalities because some of you might not know what an inequality is. So here's a definition that you will be asked for in class. An inequality is a mathematical sentence that contains one of these five symbols. And these five symbols are greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or it will contain the does not equal, okay? So you think of an equation, which we've been working with recently. Equations are a mathematical sentence that contain the equal sign. Well, if you just take away that equal sign and you put in its place one of these five symbols, it changes from an equation to an inequality, okay? Inequalities have a ton, actually an infinite number of correct answers. That doesn't mean that every number you put down is correct. It just means that there's a lot of right answers and there's a lot of wrong answers. And we're going to see how this works out and what this all looks like as we move on. Okay. So first we need to look at an example. Here we have an example of x is equal to 5. So let's say you worked out some equation. It's not important what the equation is, but let's say you got the answer to be x is equal to 5. And you worked out some inequality problem and you got the answer to be x is less than 5. Well, I want to understand the main difference between an inequality and an equation is, well, what can x be right here? 5. Is there any number other than 5 that x can be? No. It's pretty straightforward. But over here, what is x allowed to be? Can x be 5 in this situation right here? No, because that's the less than symbol. X is less than 5. If x was 5, that wouldn't make sense because that would say 5 is less than 5, and we all know that that doesn't work. But what can x be? Well, pick any number less than 5. It could possibly be, and these aren't all of them because you could include fractions and decimals and things like that, but you could include 4, 3, 1, 0. I know I skipped 2, I'm not including all of them. Negative 3, negative 8. These are just some of the numbers that it could be, that x is allowed to be, okay? The whole idea is finding out if I could replace this x with one of these numbers that makes this sentence up here true, okay? These are all numbers I could replace the x with and that sentence would still be true. Think about it. 4 is less than 5. 0 is less than 5. Negative 3 is less than 5. That's how that works, okay? Next, I want to show you something here. This is the graphing part. If you were ever told to graph the solution for an equation, like this is a solution for an equation, you're told to graph it, it's going to be really simple. And you're almost never asked to graph these things. But you would simply find where 5 is on the number line and put a dot there. So here's 0, 1, 2, 3, and the rest aren't marked, but you see tick marks for 4 and then 5 right here. So you just put a circle, you darken it in, and that's how you would graph for an equation. Now for an inequality, we need to graph it in such a way that the graph shows all the potential numbers that this could equal. So what that means is, here I have x is less than 5, so I need to find where 5 is on the number line. It's right here. I want you to put a circle, but this circle needs to be an empty circle. And we're going to go over more of that why in just a minute, okay? But I just need you to, trust me right now, put an empty circle, and then I need you to shade in where all of these numbers are located at, like where all these numbers, don't put little dots. this x can be anything that's less than 5. Well, where is less than 5? Is less than 5 this way or this way? Which way is it? Which way should I shade? It's going to be that way. So we're going to shade as we move down the line like that. Voila. And that's how you shade it in. You need to shade it in all the way to the arrow. You start at your circle, go all the way to the arrow, even shade in the arrow, and that helps it stand out clearly. Okay? Let's look at some more examples and I'll explain more as we go on. Two types of problems that you're mainly going to see in this section. You're going to be told to graph solutions for inequalities. That means these things right here are solutions. And we're going to graph the possible solutions that would, make this sentence true, like the things that x is allowed to be. Like over here, what can x be? Well, x could be a 2 or a 1 or a 0 or any of the negative numbers, okay? All right, so let's graph this. So here we have our graphs. And you can always pause the video to create these graphs. You don't have to go and number them. Notice I just put the tick marks. The tick marks do need to be evenly spaced in a way that they do look nice and neat. You might want to get a straight edge, like a piece of paper folded over, or a ruler to help you make these graphs. But anyways, here we have x is less than 3. So you need to find where 3 is. So 3 is right here, okay? And I'm going to put, once again, my empty circle. And I graph where all the less than values are, which is heading towards the negatives, okay? And we just need to shade that in like so, okay? All right, next we have x is greater than 1. Well, where's 1? 1's right here. Uno. I'm going to put, again, my empty circle, okay? And now I need to shade where the greater than direction. Well, greater than is heading towards all those positive numbers that way. So we need to come greater, and we move on. Okay? We move on. All right, simple enough. Next. You'll notice that there's something different about these two inequalities versus the top two. These bottom inequalities contain the less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. The little line underneath the little sideways V, that means that you can include that number. For instance, up here, is x able to be 3? 3 is less than 3? That doesn't make sense. But in this situation, a can be 5. Well, why? Well, think about it. 5 is less than or equal to 5. Well, that or equal to at the end makes us able to include the 5 as a solution. So this time, we're going to fill in our circle. So we need to find where 5 is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We put a circle, but we need to fill it in, okay? Because we left the circles up there empty to show that we can't include that number as a solution. It's where we start at, it's where we start our graph at, but we can't include that number as a solution because it doesn't make sense. In this case, it does. And we graph in the less than direction, which is this way. Okay, next we have over here, we have x is greater than or equal to -6. We find -6, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, -6 right here. We go ahead and make our filled in circle. It's greater than, so we graph in the greater than direction. You just really need to learn where greater than it. I mean, think about it, greater, those are the positive numbers. The positive is the greater, okay? Negative is the less. You head towards the negatives, okay? All right, we got one more. I told you there was two parts to this. One part was when you are told to, one part of this is when you're told to graph an inequality. Another part is when you're going to be told to write an inequality. It's kind of the reverse. One, it gives you an inequality and it says graph. You do the opposite of that when it shows you a graph and it says, hey, based off this graph, can you create an inequality based off this graph? So let's take a look at that right now. So we're told to write an inequality for each graph. And so we're just going to look at two graphs right now. So like you have a graph like this, it's already got it graphed out for you. You need to notice three things. One, you need to notice where does the number start at? Starts at -4. Okay, that's where our graph starts. Does it have a filled-in circle or an empty circle? We have a filled-in circle. And which direction is it going in? Is it going towards the positives or towards the negatives? It's going towards the positives. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to write it out like this. First, we're going to put a variable. We pick any variable we want. We don't have to use x, but I prefer to use x. So I'm going to put in an x, okay, right here. I'm going to put my -4 right here. Okay, now we got to figure out what symbol goes in the middle. This -4 came from the fact it started at -4. The symbol is going to be a greater than symbol, and we need to show that x is greater because that's where we're graphing. All these values represent what x can be. So x is greater than -4, okay? But it also can include -4 because the circle's filled in, so we got to put that little line underneath our sideways V. So there you go. You have x is greater than or equal to -4. Okay. Next example. Here we have this. Well, we'll notice that our graph starts at -7, so we can go ahead and put at least some stuff down. We can go ahead and put our, once again, I'm going to choose x as my variable. Put a -7 down, and am I growing towards the positives or towards the negatives? I'm going deeper into the negatives. Well, if I'm going deeper in the negatives, should I use the greater than or the less than symbol? I should use the less than symbol. Well, what am I saying is less than what? I'm saying x is less than -7 because this graph shows that I'm including all these negatives numbers that are below -7. So I'm going to put a less than symbol, which means to show that x is less than 7, you got to make sure the v is opening up towards the 7, okay? Make sure the v is opening up towards the 7. Do I need to put a line underneath it? No, I don't, because if you look carefully, you'll notice that is an empty circle right there. So that means I cannot include -7 as my answer, so I just leave it as a less than symbol. Okay, that's about all there is for this section. Make sure you review over this, and make sure if you haven't already that you go back and study the previous sections, because you probably have a test or a quiz coming up real soon. Maybe in class this day. You never know. So just want to give you a warning. Make sure you're going back and studying over past materials. See you in class.